Esteemed participants, it is an absolute delight to extend a warm welcome to each one of you at the 19th Sustainability Summit. I trust you had a delightful lunch and are feeling refreshed. As we prepare to continue with our program, I would like to remind you that all summit-related information can be accessed by scanning the QR code provided on your delegate badges. Can all the participants take seats? We are about to begin the next session. Nowadays, progressive organizations are actively fostering a diverse and inclusive culture and workforce. By ensuring everyone has access to opportunities and resources, they promote an inclusive decision-making process. This session on social inclusion captures how social inclusion considerations across the value chain is a key factor in creating equitable and sustainable business practices that can strengthen the Indian economy. It is my honor and privilege to extend my heartfelt welcome to the moderator and all panel members of the session to the dais. I request the moderator, Mr. Prem Singh, Group CHRO, JK Organization, to take the lead. Before we begin the session, we will have a launch ceremony of compendium of case studies leveraging technology to maximize CSR impact. May I request the panel members to please unveil the compendium.
So the first is the release?
Yeah. This compendium highlights 25 most unique and innovative case studies in education, healthcare, environment, skills, livelihood, and women empowerment. Additionally, a detailed CSR survey conducted with member companies to gauge the effectiveness, sustainability, and implementation challenges of utilizing technology is also a part of this compendium. This compendium can be accessed through the QR code on the screen. It is also available on CESD's website. May I now request the moderator, Mr. Prem Singh, Group CHRO, JK Organization, to take the lead and commence the discussion.
Good afternoon. Well, I thought as much कि afternoon का जो response है, that is likely to be a thanda, and it was a thanda response. In fact, there was no response at all. Good afternoon. दिल्ली वालों थोड़ा जोश तो दिखाओ. Good afternoon. Better. I'm sure you can do much better. So, well, I understand it's a post-lunch session, and I must confess that I'm worried because it's a post-lunch session. Because normally what happens is, one of the critical tasks any moderator has for post-lunch session is how do you keep people awake for obvious reasons. So that's a challenge for me, but I must tell you that I have my task which is very easy. Any reason why I say it's easy? Well, all the panel members I have with me are women. So that makes my job easy. And because once you have women in your team, you can be rest assured that the session is going to be extremely engaging and extremely rich. So friends, the focus of this discussion is essentially about social inclusion. And if you look at the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals of UN, out of 169 goals that you have listed out there, 90% plus are around social. And in that social dimension, what they are focusing about is inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion of all kinds of forms, not just about gender, all kinds of forms of inclusion. How safe, how secure, how well taken care of your people feel at workplace, how you are running your wellness programs, how you are looking after your people, how you are looking after the culture, the workplace environment, all kinds of dimensions which are softer aspects of a workplace. Something which touches upon the individuals, their safety, their well-being, their contribution, their creativity, their innovation, everything. And also something that builds up the culture of the organization. And there are a lot of researches which have shown that as long as you can get your culture right, you can make a difference to the bottom line of the organization. So culture and inclusion and social equity and diversity and all these softer aspects, at times it might look to be just touchy-feely, something which is nice to have. But let me assure you, these so-called as touchy-feely concepts are actually very powerful. And that makes me to say soft is extremely powerful. There has been a very classical research which has focused on the assessment of softer aspects of organization versus hard aspects. For example, culture, talent, reputation, inclusion, focus on social aspects versus hardware aspects, for example, plant and machinery, your assets. If you study their contribution on your stock market, the proportion of the softer aspects has been continuously increasing. The latest research that was conducted around this, it showed that up to 84% of the impact comes from the softer side. So that's the power of softer aspect. Let me just talk about some more data points and then we'll get into discussion with the panel members. There was a research which was carried out by World Economic Forum that if you were to work diligently on inclusion of women, trying to ensure gender equity, gender participation, and a balanced organization view, you could add as much as $12 trillion to the global GDP. $12 trillion. That's at a global level. At organizational level, you could add something like up to 35% to the top line of your organization if you were to focus on inclusion and equity. So that's the power of social inclusion. One last data point which I just want to mention before I get into the discussion. At the current stage, and that's the reason why we must be having these discussions more often. And at the current stage of participation of women in the workforce, if we continue with the same rate, it would take something like 140 to 150 years to reach the equal participation of women and men in the organizations. That's research. That's a research which is global, which brings a picture, and that makes a justification as to why we must be focusing and talking about these issues which are so live. Now, I'm assisted by very able members on my panel, and as the Master of Ceremonies mentioned, as a part of compendium, the book which has been just released, it contains the best practices and stories of some 25 organizations which have made a difference to the equity, to the social inclusion, and which has really made sure that they are able to be much more inclusive and much more diverse in their approach. So please do take a look. In fact, one of the case studies is also from my own group, from J.K. Lakshmi Cement. And may I request my colleague, Mr. Sanjeeva Jha, just to stand up and identify himself. So he's the man who is responsible for driving the social inclusion agenda in J.K. Lakshmi Cement. I think we must give a big round of applause to Sanjeeva and to all 24 organizations. So, Paulomi, let me just start with you. I know that you are very passionate about women entrepreneurship programs, and you have been making a lot of difference. According to your experience, how do you think these women entrepreneurship development programs have been able to make a difference to the lives of women and also the organizations?
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you to the organizers for having me here. Though I've been speaking a lot about women entrepreneurship last many years, but since this is like sustainability, social inclusion, and women entrepreneurship all coming, under one forum, one panel, so I'm really thrilled to speak about it. Before I get into the, answering your question, like how we are creating an impact, I would like to little bit delve into the challenges and the situation, the context in which we work for everyone to understand. So as an organization, we work with rural nano women entrepreneurs whose nature of businesses are mostly very subsistence in nature, like below 1 lakh turnover. So these are not women who are like, from the middle segment or educated women we are talking about. They also, to understand inclusion, it's very critical and important to understand the layers of exclusion. So it's not like a single layered inclusion. It's not just gender based. Many a times, many of the people we are working with are victims of multiple layers of exclusion. To mention a few: gender, ethnicity, economic deprivation, educational attainments are on the low side, self-esteem. They are victims of social, there's a glass ceiling in terms of social aspiration, which leads to a very low self-esteem in them right from childhood. So when we are working with these women who are victims of so many layers of exclusion, it's a very challenging task to begin with. We always talk about multidimensional poverty and how everything. So imagine a woman from a Barela tribe who's, someone in the family is already suffering from some ailment. So a lot of money, whatever she's earning, is getting into spending that, in bearing the expenses of that. So when we're really working on ground, all the sociological, anthropological, rights-based approach lessons, we see them actually unfolding on ground, how one thing impacts the other. And how our work impacts them. I would like to admit that as we work very closely with the potential and existing entrepreneurs, so even in the rural context, we are missing out on the ultra poor. Because the way our intervention is designed, we talk about entrepreneurship, the ultra poor are mostly the producers within the economy. So they are left out. We are privileged to start our work with little, relatively less poor people. But even then, when we talk about business production practices, manufacturing practices, talk about the various market avenues in terms of, digital space, has it really opened up for these set of entrepreneurs? Because they are victims of, see, there's a gender divide in terms of, digital gender divide, digital rural urban divide. And again, when it comes to digital world also, they are victims of all these kinds of marginalizations. So when we start our work, we have to bear all these challenges, and our program is designed to accommodate all these challenges. We don't invest a lot upon creating a very lavish infrastructure, which is really far away from their places, which makes them travel like 30, 40 kilometers every day. We prioritize upon, making smaller changes in their lives, having a center in close proximity to their homes, so that they can really make the best utilization of time. Because as you know, they are also dealing with a lot of family responsibilities apart from being part of these businesses. So we do a very thorough handholding, training of these entrepreneurs. And again, we don't stop ourselves in delivering things through classroom, structure, because they're not acquainted to that mode of learning. They are women who have never been to school, or if at all have been to primary classes. So a lot of things really change for them when we are investing them at an individual level. So there's a lot of handholding as in making family visits, home visits, developing a connect and bond with their family members. That really helps, because if there is no family support in her pursuing the business, in her generating momentum in the community, so that other women from in and around support her business, it's not going to sustain, it's not going to go in the long run. See, imagine these set of women when we talk to them about like, don't use plastic, use something which is more recyclable, use more sustainable processes in your, manufacturing thing. It again adds another layer because right now they're already facing the challenge with respect to everything else. So we have to be really very, very cautious about at which stage we are introducing which thing. It has to be a little gradual in terms of process. We cannot bombard them with a lot of information right at the beginning. So we do design programs which are very phased, which are rolled out in a very phased manner, which are designed in a way that each aspect will be touched upon at the right time. Sociological context is very much taken into consideration, apart from the business angle of it. To make these interventions sustainable, also we rely a lot upon creating role models for the community, role models who are for the community, from the community, so that they also have something to look up to. They should not always be looking up to, role models who are from urban. They are not able to relate to them. So that's how, in the first phase of the program, we definitely prioritize upon creating some role models from the community, and then in the later stages, we reach out to those for whom the journey will be longer. So in terms of us accessing them, we make sure that we really collaborate very closely with the various community-based organizations, other ecosystem partners. Yeah, that's it. I hope I was able to respond to your question.
Yes, that's good. Thank you so much, Polomi. That was with respect to what NASCOM Foundation, which Polomi represents, have been trying to do. And what we heard Polomi say is various areas, for example, training, enabling people, using digital tools, collaboration, trying to make sure that you cross over the hurdles. Very important point she made was identifying right role models, because as humans, we tend to emulate something that we find very inspiring. Thank you so much. So I'll come back to you now. Let me just move to Archana. Archana, on my left-hand side, she looks after the social inclusion impact programs at Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And she's also responsible for global policy and advocacy, growth and opportunity. So very comprehensive social impact agenda. So Archana, based on your experience, based on what you are trying to do at your foundation, which are some of the most effective programs that you have seen which have made a difference to the lives of people?
Thank you so much, Premji. And thanks for having me on this panel today. I don't know how much do you know about Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but I would say that the foundation's philosophy, I would start with that. We believe that all lives should have equal value, and our mission is that each and every person should have an opportunity to lead healthy and productive life. With that mission, our chairs, Mr. Bill Gates and Melinda French Gates, who was with the foundation earlier, had about 25 years back, in fact, next year we're celebrating our 25th year anniversary of the foundation, had pledged their wealth so that they can provide equal opportunities to underprivileged and people who are vulnerable. And to that extent, I would say, Premji, the mission is really, so to say, the core of the foundation is really rooted in inclusion. The core of the foundation is really focused on providing equal opportunities to everyone. Our core work is focused on providing good health to people who do not have access to good health. Typically, women and children get excluded. They are the ones that do not have privileges of getting access to quality health care. Therefore, you mentioned about SDGs as well. Next week is focused on social development goals in New York, where governments, countries who pledge for social development goals, the 17 goals, 180 countries have pledged for it. They're going to take a stock and review in terms of what's been the progress when it comes to these SDGs. Unfortunately, after COVID, all the progress that was done towards SDG has actually stalled. So today, it is so to say, a dramatic situation that we are facing, because 20 years there had been so much of progress when it comes to, you know, reduction in maternal mortality, child mortality, equal access to education. Now all of that is stalling. So it is at one point, you know, a cause of worry for the world. While you say social inclusion, I would say, you know, especially within the audience, there are many of you are representatives from corporate organizations. While organizations like ours, which is philanthropic organizations, we care a lot about, you know, that's the reason why we exist. Our reason to exist is to bridge the gap between those who have and those who do not have. But I think for corporates like yourself, who do tend to focus on, you know, economic growth and business growth, it's important to think about social inclusion. As I was saying, that our biggest program is health, but we do have other areas that we work in as well. Gender equality is a big division for the foundation. It gets about 11% of our funding. Annually, we spend anywhere between $7 billion to $8 billion, and that goes towards providing better access to health, better access to economic opportunities, which is, you know, small landholder farmers. How can they increase their profitability? How can they increase their, you know, productivity, as well as people should have better access to sanitation, et cetera. So, you know, that's really our focus. But the programs that have, I would say on gender equality, some of the statistics that you mentioned, which is like if you have women who have opportunity to grow economically, yes, that's true. You know, by 2030, it would contribute to about 17. So, you know, while you said these are softer aspects, I would say that these are pretty hard aspects. These are not softer aspects, because women, you know, if women have opportunity to grow, if they have opportunity to represent, it's about 17 trillion or 17, actually some McKinsey data says about 30 trillion, right? That's a pretty hard number. It's not a soft number. I would say that, you know, these are issues that should be mainstream. These are core to businesses. These are core to organizations, whether the way that they do businesses, how they think about their supply chain, how they think about, you know, their external stakeholders. For us, it's about external stakeholders, how our business is about, you know, saving people's life, about social inclusion, but it's also, you know, the aspect of diversity, inclusivity, as well as equity that we're bringing within the foundation, how we get represented, right? How is it that we can think about getting diversity of talent, diversity of views, because obviously it brings in a more competitive and more comprehensive environment internally, but also in terms of, you know, our own representation. We do look at women representation at every level. Normally, you look at board levels. Even in India, there is gap when it comes to board and board representation, but as you have women growing within the organization, there should be representation. You know, it's an inverted pyramid. Representation actually falls, but that representation should be equitable at every level, and that's how we evaluate our work. We do have a DEI report which we make external every year. Which is how is it that we are improving our own processes within our partner ecosystem. We tend to work, being a global organization, we tend to work a lot more with international organization, a lot more focus on domestic organization now. How is it that we are working, you know, building domestic capacities as well? And lastly, I would say is that, you know, the work that the foundation does is not, despite the fact that we are a sizable foundation, but we do realize that we are not the only one who can solve for social equity problem. It is working with the governments, but partners like yourself. It would call for action from each one of us to make a more equitable world. It's not a solution that only we can provide. We have some exemplars ourselves. We have some programs ourselves that are working much better than the others. But I would call out on each one of you to be thinking about DEI in everyday practices, work that you do, rather than, you know, thinking about it to be a principle only along, you know, some function, or it's not an HR's role, or somebody in sustainability. It is about everyday and everyday work principles. Thank you.
Thank you. That was very insightful, Archana. And a couple of things which I really picked up is, in fact, one of the very powerful points you mentioned was we are making a difference by our own organization to a great extent, but What is more important is other stakeholders, that is organizations, individuals, other entities, they must also play their part. And we are there to help people, we are there to enable people, and along with others, we can make that much more difference. Archana also made a very important point around trying to make a difference to the lowest point of the pyramid, that is trying to help the workers and farmers raise their productivity. Women, the marginalized groups, for example, girls, children, are trying to support their health. She spoke about haves and have-nots. I think these are very important elements to be able to make a difference on a sustainable basis. So let me turn to Shivani. Shivani looks after the Women Leadership Program at CII, and they carry out a lot of researches. So Shivani, one of the major concerns which we have seen is this stereotypes, the bias, the preconceived notion, this XYZ activity can be done only by men. This ABC activity is not for women, and there are many other stereotypes, many other biases. All of us have biases. How do you think we can address this fundamental issue of biases? And in your experience, what are some of the methods that seem to be working to address this?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Singh. I wish I had the answer, because then we would have solved the problem. But let me start by saying, actually quoting some research, since you mentioned that the Center for Women Leadership has been engaging in research. And in a recent study that we conducted in partnership with Fortune, some of the numbers that came up were that if we look at the Fortune 500 companies, we are actually looking at only 1.6% of leadership positions being filled by women. If we expand this number from 500 to 1,000, we are still looking at only about 3.2% women holding leadership positions, right? And usually when we have this conversation in a room such as this, if we were to open it up for, a to and fro, we say, well, women will, the leadership journeys have just begun, women will rise to leadership, they have started entering, so on and so forth. But interestingly, in a recent research which has been supported, I think, by BMGF only, what has surprisingly popped up is that some of the largest challenges are actually around women entering the workforce itself. So the bias definitely exists, and if we look at, again, some of the studies that it was a very interesting study actually that we did with Kantar, and where around 1,000 interviews were conducted across India. And interestingly, everybody, all men and women who were interviewed, almost 95% people said that, of course, gender equality is very important for the country to progress, right? So we were very happy to see that result. We said, okay, finally everybody is convinced, everybody wants, equality and equity and men and women to get equal opportunity and so on and so forth. But sadly, there were more questions in the survey. So while overall gender equality was very important, we asked questions around, whose job is it to earn money? And about 40% men believed that it is still essentially the man's job to get the money into the household. We said, okay, but is there a problem if the man earns more or the woman earns more? So 45% men said that obviously the men should earn more, right? Now the problem gets worse because 35% women also agreed that it is the men who should earn more. The worrying trend, and there were many questions, but I won't take you through the whole survey. The worrying trend was that even when we explored around education, like who should go for college education, around 67%, both men and women, believed that it was more important for boys to get college education than girls. So the problem of bias, all of this to sort of establish that the problem of bias is very deep-rooted, is clearly not just in the, workspace, is very deeply connected to, all the women and the communities that both Paulami, Archana, everybody is referring to. And while industry is trying to address some of the challenges, and I'll come to that part as well, I think, as Archana said, a lot more effort is required. And a lot of collaboration across multiple stakeholders, right? Industry can't solve it alone, and philanthropic organizations can't solve it alone. So what can we do collectively, I think, to address some of these biases, I think is a question that would be good to reflect upon. I'd urge all of you to reflect upon. As far as corporates are concerned, what is industry doing? What is CII doing with industry to sort of, address some of these biases? And now the optimistic things that are happening. Corporates are, and I presume some of them are in this, compendium that has been launched as well. But corporates are looking at a lot of their workplace policies, right? These workplace policies, be they around hiring, be they around retention, what can they do to make the workspace safer, healthier, ergonomic designs to help both men and women function. How can they actually help in everybody's career development? So, looking at mentorship, looking at sponsorship, looking at capacity building, actually doing trainings to address biases. So I'm sure most people in these companies are in this room are associated with companies who are doing trainings to actually talk about these biases which till quite recently were not spoken about, right? Both biases that are conscious and biases that are subconscious. How can we address them? And what are some systems and procedures that we can actually put in place so that we don't fall into the traps of these subconscious biases? I think what is more interesting than what corporates are doing in their workspace are how corporates are actually extending out into the social sector and into the community to get women and others into the workspace. And I don't just mean CSR, because obviously we all know about CSR, but we have examples of companies who are recognizing that just by saying that we want women to be part of our workforce, they're not getting the women, right? We want to get women, but where are the women? And then you sort of, start rolling with, oh, their families don't allow them to come, and we have plant operations and the families don't allow them to come, and the women don't want to come. We are not a sector that is seen as a woman-friendly sector, so on and so forth. And we have examples of companies who have actually gone into the communities, right, and have worked with the families to make them more comfortable with the workspace, right? So brought their parents, brought their families into their workspace, said that this is where your daughter, your wife, or so-and-so is going to work. These are all the systems that are in place. Made the community that the woman is a part of comfortable with the fact that the woman will come and work. And they have actually seen a big uptake of jobs in locations that were not considered friendly or in positions that were not considered women-friendly too. So for us, I think that has been very encouraging to see, because the workplace policies are still cool, but this seemed so much cooler, right? Similarly, there have been companies who've started creating women-only field locations. And they have created the infrastructure to go with it, right? So it can't be just a wish. It has to, of course, be accompanied by investment. And we have these examples that are coming forth as people going much beyond what is expected, mandated, to try and actually get women on board. I also want to uplift that, you mentioned softer elements, and Archana said they're not soft, they are actually, they're business decisions. And I think various things which are holding back women from joining, such as, for example, care responsibilities. Businesses are now very seriously talking about these as responsibilities that have to be provided for. And what we are very encouraged to see, and what we like to amplify as CII, is when businesses talk about, for example, care responsibilities as responsibilities of all employees, and not just employees, not just women employees. Um, I also think like a major role that organizations like BMGF play, and you sort of highlighted that, Mr. Singh, is that, as an ecosystem player, while we are having this conversation with industry, organizations like BMGF are able to take it to other stakeholders as well, right? So all of a sudden, if you're in the space, for example, everybody's talking about the care economy. And by everybody, I mean industry and government and, the development sector. And that sort of creates a space where people can actually collaborate and work towards making a change happen. So without taking more time, I think the fact is that there are many new initiatives that companies are coming up, recognizing that biases will have to be addressed beyond just the office space. Be those in education as well. I mean, companies are setting up exclusive colleges where they're training women for sectors that are seen as non-women friendly sectors. We at CII, for example, do a campus to career program where we again connect with colleges to acquaint them to what workspaces might be like, so that they are familiar, the workspaces are familiar. So basically, I think building a lot of bridges and moving beyond what we agreed as our only space to function and to move beyond, as I was saying, the office space, because the bias is much beyond the office space. And to address it, we therefore have to extend beyond.
Sure. Thank you so much, Shivani. That was so insightful. And what I really liked, it's a journey. It's not an event. So it takes a lot of effort, not working on one lever, but working on multiple levers. And as Shivani mentioned, it takes time. It takes perseverance. And a very important point she made was trying to make sure that the subject of the whole discussion, that is the woman, feels as an integral part of this whole movement towards the journey for inclusion. For example, she mentioned about getting families to the workstation, to the workspace, and making sure that there is appreciation of what's happening, and to make sure that the people, including the women, feel emotionally and socially safe. Moving forward, so I'll now turn to Polomi, who deals with the whole ecosystem of technology, NASCOM Foundation. We know that a lot of technological application is happening in the space of social impact. So Polomi, my question to you would be, in your experience, can you share some examples where you have been able to leverage technology to make a difference towards social inclusion and diversity?
Sure. I would like to give you a bit of a context that I lead the women entrepreneurship vertical within the foundation, and primarily our responsibility is to work closely with the entrepreneurs and women entrepreneurs from the rural segment, and we do end-to-end interventions in many cases, which is providing them access to finance, supporting them with local and national level mentors, subject matter experts, regular training on business development plans, financial literacy, all of that. But the core of it all, being part of the foundation, which is like NASCOM Foundation. NASCOM, as all of you are aware, is the IT industry association. So the core of it all remains digital technology. And as a result, there is a good amount of thrust on digital training of these women. When I talk about digital, I mean we are introducing the digital payment gateways to them, making sure that they're able to make the best use of it. We're opening up the various marketing, social commerce avenues, Instagram, Facebook, WhatsApp business, Instagram business page. Also, the e-commerce. With ONDC coming into the space, obviously that it has been democratized far more, but even with some other e-commerce platforms exclusively working for women entrepreneurs, nano women entrepreneurs from the rural context like Flipkart, Samarth, and Amazon Saheli, Amazon Karigar, all of that. We introduce them to all of it. We help them out with the registration processes. So what I'm trying to say is that the registration processes also, like, e-governance. So we help them out with fetching these benefit schemes through digital, digital applications and all. So digital is the core of all our interventions. And technology, though there are two angles to it. One is access to technology, which is where we dent in. Because making the technology accessible to them is a bit of a challenge. I will give more data points to that. But once technology becomes accessible to them, the benefit of using technology, digital technology, or any other technology for that matter, is technology is unbiased towards anyone. Technology doesn't have social biases or biases of any kind, as opposed to human interaction. So when a woman takes her products to a wholesaler, he might have this thing that, oh, it's a woman, I don't know whether she's well-equipped, aware about her products and all the information she's producing is correct or not. But if it's technology, it will just judge or assess the woman based on the capacity, based on the information, not based on the gender or the other identities attached to her. So that's the benefit of using technology. So when we talk about digital technology opening up the market for them, the thing is that all these years she has been selling her product, papad, achar, sari, home decor products, to her known circle or to the middleman who was exploitative and exploiting her for years. But now the open market is available to her. She can sell the product at her choice in terms of deciding by when she will sell, to whom she will sell, at what price she will sell. So in all those regards, technology has really, really helped her leverage the market available to her. Someone producing Maheshwari silk saris may not have that many customers in and around, but there might be a good price that she will be fetching it if she is able to send it to someone in the southern part of the country, or for that matter, eastern part of the country. And that's one. Again, coming back to the first point, which is access to technology. So GSMA reports on a year-on-year basis has been telling the gender divide, rural-urban divide, gender divide in terms of access to smartphone, in terms of internet penetration, in terms of adoption rates. And one of the primary reasons behind the low adoption rate has been stated as the digital literacy levels. So even when you give a woman a handphone, does she know how to make optimal use of it in terms of using it for productive purposes? Will she be only doing Instagram reels and uploading her pictures, activating her personal network, or will she be using it for business purposes? Will she be able to make the right decisions with so much information coming her way, because she has not been used to it earlier? She had a very limited circle. So there are these biases which are stopping her from making the access to phones available. Our program design is exactly coming in that space. So we are not saying when we are selecting the program participants that you have to have an individual independent smartphone. Even if the smartphone is there in the family and it's available, accessible to you for the training purposes, it's fine. Once the woman learns how to optimally use the smartphone, in many cases she learns after the end of the training more than the men in the family. So the man in the family comes to her and says, "Ki payment, can you please do this payment for me, because I know that you have attended a training and therefore you're better at doing it as compared to me." And when she starts doing it right, he's seeing that he doesn't have to go all the way to make the payment. It's all happening, sitting at home. There have been a lot of instances, although it's a bit of a personal note on which the program participants have shared this with me, but there has been giftings like, thanks. I mean, this is something that you're doing for the family. Online classes, during COVID, online classes were, very bothing. So there were children who were looking up to their mothers, but they were not able to provide that kind of a support. But in many of the cases, after a program, now women are supporting their kids with online classes, with learning designs from Pinterest. So the family is also looking at her in a different way, because she is, coming across as a person with whom you can discuss these things. Earlier she was like, okay, mummy se ye baat karke kya pata, unhe to pata bhi nahi hai kya chal raha hai duniya mein, kya chal raha hai, WhatsApp pe kya ho raha hai, Facebook pe kya ho raha hai. So that is a bit of, the social perception about herself has changed within the community, within the family. That is something which we often don't talk about. We talk about the outcome indicators as like business revenue itna tha, 2x ho gaya, 4x ho gaya, but these are also things which are very critical when you're talking about inclusion. As the other panelists mentioned, inclusion is not a sideline topic, it should be mainstreamed, and this is how we intend to mainstream it. We are definitely working a lot in the access part of it. There have been a lot of participants who have come to the forum and said that we had time. We were using our time in creating Instagram reels. But now we realize that how much more can we do with this kind of understanding, with this kind of knowledge. And technology, it's like money makes money. Technology awareness leads you to another level of technology awareness. So that's why we have stages of, digital literacy, which is like, initially it's awareness, then application, then adoption, then acceleration. So now you are part of a lot of technology-based platforms. You are able to fetch more learnings. They were hesitant to go to a bookshop because they are 35, 40, never gone to school. अभी सोचेंगे क्या गांव में कि अभी इतने बुढ़ापे में पढ़ने जा रही है. But with technology, she at the convenient time, जब सारा काम कर लिया घर का, she can at her own convenience very easily learn new things that she has been learning, waiting to learn all her life. So that's also something that's for me is inclusion, not just making her part of the economy, but from a well-being factor, are we taking care of all the marginalized these things? I would just like to add one thing, that since I represent the foundation, I lead the women entrepreneurship vertical, but there's a different vertical called D&I, the diversity and inclusion. And as part of that, the member companies who are part of NASSCOM, we are very closely working with all the industry associations and industry partners, and we're trying to ensure that LGBTQI plus communities, PWDs, and other aspects of other such forums and other such communities are also part of the mainstream industry. So that's something, obviously IT industry is still way ahead as compared to other industries when it comes to gender, ensuring that there is a good representation at leadership, entry level, and the middle level. But still we are trying to make it gender inclusive from other lenses also, little deeper than that, this binary of men and women, getting deeper into that aspect and having creating a good space for the third gender as well. Yeah, I would like to take a pause.
Thank you. Very insightful, very powerful, and particularly the point that I particularly liked was the fact that when you educate a woman, you don't educate one individual, you educate the entire family. In fact, there is a saying, if you educate a man, you empower one individual. If you educate a woman, you empower the entire family, in fact, the entire village. So thank you so much. Moving forward to explore some more dimensions around collaboration, and Archana did mention in her previous comment that it is no good if you are trying to work alone and make a difference alone. In fact, there is a saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And what I picked up from the comment which Archana made early on, that collaboration is extremely important. And in your organization, in your foundation, Archana, I'm sure you are collaborating with various organizations. So can you share some example of a very effective and successful collaboration which has yielded a lot of benefits to all the stakeholders involved?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for even saying that quote, because this is one of the quotes that's etched on the foundation's campus in Seattle. If you want to go far, you should work with people. So that collaboration is totally etched in our philosophy. One of the examples that, I mean, there are many examples, because we are an organization. You cannot work by yourself. You have to work with others. You work with governments, you work with private sector, you work with academia, you work with researchers. The work that we do on health, which tends to be the biggest area that we focus in. So let's take the example of vaccines and access to vaccines, right? So if you look at the dreaded diseases that impact the most vulnerable and the most poor, since we're talking about social inclusion, and that's also the area that we work in. Private sector normally does not tend to invest in research with those diseases that actually impact the poor, because there is no profitability in investing in a market for poor people, because who's going to buy? Poor people are going to buy, and they will not have money to buy. So therefore, the investment doesn't happen. We do underwrite risks for research, because it is risky to invest. R&D would not happen. It can lead to failure as well. Us as an organization, we invest in R&D. But at the same time, there is there is a market that has to be created. There has to be enough volumes, and the volumes are usually coming in from the public sector, from governments. So to say, a collaborative risk pooling mechanism is Gavi, which is Global Alliance for Vaccines, where not only philanthropies like us, but also governments and private sector pool in funding so that there are enough and more vaccines that are, first of all, that funding is available for manufacturing of vaccines, but also that funding is available for countries so that they can access that financial pool to provide that access to the poor and vulnerable people. And that has led to introduction of vaccines in many, many countries, especially in Asia, Africa, lower and middle income countries in South and Southeast Asia. It has led to, especially access to vaccines has led to so many lives of children being saved, millions and millions of lives of children being saved. But there can be very many other collaborative platforms as well, especially on gender equality with the industry, CII. We are collaborating with CII, and the Center for Women Leadership is one such collaborative effort. It requires a CII Foundation where they can bring in a whole lot of industry so that they can see they can understand practices that can help bring in gender equality, diversity within their own organizations. Likewise, they can help, we've spoken about role modeling and exemplars. There are, corporations, there are, especially, if I look at automobile industry, that's a heavily men-centric industry. Women are not on shop floor. But then there are, exemplary organizations like Mahindra, like Tata's, who have women-led shop floors now. And there would be other companies as well who are doing so well in terms of, and making a difference in terms of existing policies so as to give women the space. They're making safe spaces. Policies are being kept in mind that women can participate and deliver to their full potential. So I think it requires action from everyone. This I totally believe in. And especially when you're talking about, when you started, you spoke about, Premji, you spoke about 100 years to bridge the gap. Now, 100 years will not happen with perseverance and persistence. And it's time for quick action, right? Because if you to collapse that 100-year of gap, action has to be taken by everybody, and I think that's why collaboration is very important. And then one last point that I would say is about, I look at women in the room. I think they're, you also mentioned about emotional security. I think all of us are pretty emotional secure. In fact, women have more, so to say, EQ versus men. They also juggle many jobs. I don't think that they need any space for further empowerment. I think each one of us feels pretty empowered. They bring in intellect as well. Biases have sort of say they become like, it's like a blind spot, but I just feel like women within the room, they don't feel underpowered, so that they have to be empowered, right? So it's about making the shifts, making a shift, immediately and also by everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, very powerful. I know that we are in the last 7-8 minutes, so let's try and make the best use of this time. So very quickly, so we spoke about the hard numbers, soft power leading to hard numbers, essentially prosperity. So Shivani, my question to you, and if you can throw some light very briefly, any recommendations for industry as to how they can take some steps so that inclusion leads to some financial benefits and prosperity all over at multiple levels. Any initial thoughts?
I think you said it, Mr. Singh. I think as industry, we should start looking at inclusion as a business agenda. So, move inclusion beyond just HR conversations, but actually look at, you referred to some study which was actually talking about what is that 80% that it's contributing to, and if it's economic returns, then it's really not a social agenda and good to do thing, but actually a business agenda. So that would be my first wish, recommendation, etc., that can we start looking at inclusion as a business agenda and bring in conversations around gender responsive procurement? What does it really mean to invest in inclusion, and what are the business returns that I see as industry, and therefore how much more investment do I want to put in? I think the other thing that I want to sort of add to what Archana was mentioning, while we're talking about inclusion, we're talking about bringing in women or bringing in, other layers of, addressing other layers of vulnerability. I think when we speak about the workspace and about professionals in the workspace, I think it would be nice if we actually start having a conversation around humanizing the workspace rather than saying, oh, we need to do A, B, C, D, E to get more women in. I don't think it is really about getting the women in. I don't think those policies benefit just the women. And I don't think if those adjustments are made to workspaces, they will be better only for women. And therefore, if the benefit is going to be accrued by everybody who's engaged in the workspace, and it'll be a better workspace for all people, I think the narrative should change to, one, being a business conversation, and second, how do we become better workspaces for all, including women? And then last, of course, everybody who's trying and is doing good things should be recognized. We should uplift those best practices. CII is committed to doing that, so others should please join us and share. So I think another ask of everybody here in the audience would be that if you think that you're doing something that is unique, please bring it to our notice, because we would love to sort of, highlight that and take that out to the world. Thank you.
Sure, whatever great you are doing, please bring it here. And I think this compendium is one very good example. So we have just 5 minutes left now, and I would take at least one question from the audience. Yes, please. So can we get a mic there for the gentleman? And sir, if you can be brief, yes. Any mic there, please? Yeah, for the gentleman.
Hello, I'm Rudolph D'Souza. And my question is, I thought this session was about social inclusion, but it turned out to be only about women inclusion. So you all never spoke about other sectors like people who are physically or who are mentally challenged or LGBTQI, so I thought that maybe if you put some layer into that, it would be good.
Sure. Very important. Thank you so much for highlighting that. So social inclusion is all forms of inclusion, not gender alone. And I think I made that comment early in the beginning, that all forms of inclusion. So let me just ask my colleague Polomi, because you are working in the technological space, any specific example or any specific insight which you can share to highlight the other forms of inclusion beyond gender, just in 2 minutes.
Yeah, sure. I was just wearing my other hat. When I had worked in the National Rural Livelihoods Mission, I was heading the social inclusion vertical there. So we used to work very closely with manual scavenger, victims of human trafficking, as well as bonded laborers. So I don't know how many of you are aware, but there's a national program as a part of which almost 9 CR plus rural women are part of the self-help groups. So that's an institutional architecture which is already there in place in each village, each block, each district of the country. This architecture exists. Now, the challenge was, how do we ensure that these self-help groups are including these within the rural segment also, within the poor also, the additional vulnerabilities who are affected by these. So we created a lot of concept notes, strategic notes, and how ensure that the state missions are taking care of it, and it's actually getting rolled out on the field, on the ground like that. I'm not sure about how much technology can play a role in terms of many of these layers, because the list is endless, coastal communities, fishermen communities. When we were working, we realized there are so many, different communities, and there are so many specialized organizations working in this space, really trying to address the vulnerabilities associated with a particular community. But when it comes to technology, as I mentioned earlier also, technology doesn't have biases. So definitely there are certain kinds of inclusion that we're able to, in our program right now, Women Entrepreneurship Program. When we are selecting a woman, we are selecting women from marginalized communities in terms of ethnicity. Ethnic identity itself is a big, thing there. in terms of caste, how the country is divided, into communities like that. So within the village also, we don't have to, if you're doing a digital training, as a trainer may have biases, right? But when it comes to technology, as a technology doesn't have a bias, so therefore it is a great leveler in that sense. And also the use of the technology, the way you are adopting to it, it doesn't have to have anything to do with your vulnerabilities, especially if the training is done in such a way that you are made capable enough to deal with it. So from that point of view, I feel that technology is a great enabler when it comes to addressing vulnerabilities. But again, access to that technology has a lot of barriers wherein you have to really play a role.
Thank you. So I wish we could go on, but I think we have to conclude because there is another session that is planned after this. So just to wrap up, just in 2 minutes, friends. So what we really spoke about as a panel is social inclusion is not just nice to have. It's a business necessity. If we are not doing it, we are missing out something big time. Number one. Number two, technology is a big enabler and it takes away all the biases. And in fact, of late, technology and digital is being utilized to empower people. And Polomi spoke about how the women are far more quick in terms of learning the IT tools. And that's how you are able to empower the overall family and the entire community. Point number three, while it is good to talk about that we should encourage women, we should encourage other forms of inclusion, LGBTQ, differently abled people, and all kinds of diversity. It is extremely important that we also educate people who are already in the organization. I'll give an example. In JK organization, while we are encouraging people to embrace diversity in all forms of, in all its forms, we are making sure that we educate our manager, all the managers, how do you deal with this? How do you effectively onboard these people? And how do you make sure that these people are actually productive and effective in their roles? That's very important. Last point, it's all about balance. And I'll just give an example from physics lessons, the lesson of pendulum. You know, when you look at the pendulum has a characteristic that it goes from one extreme to the other. And when it goes to the other extreme, its velocity becomes zero. Then it comes to the other extreme, the velocity again becomes zero. When it is at the center, that is where it is running the fastest. Social inclusion is another similar concept where you are trying to balance out various elements of society, community, organizations to say everything is important, and if we are inclusive of every important element, we would be running the fastest as a community, as a society. Thank you so much, friends, for your time. Really appreciate your patience. Thank you so much, CII, for organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, with this, we end the session. Our sincere gratitude to our distinguished panel members and the moderator for making this an extremely insightful discussion. I now kindly request all the speakers and the moderator to gather for a group photograph. Thank you. The next session, Trailblazers in Sustainability, will commence shortly in Sovereign Hall 2. May I request all the participants to please move to Sovereign Hall 2.